This presentation of In Their Own Words is brought to you by the Honor Project and is dedicated to the brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces. For a generation of American soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, the war in Vietnam was a nightmarish blur. It was a conflict with no clear goals, waged against a stealthy enemy in the dense jungles and rice paddies of a strange land. All too often, the chaos of battle found Allied forces trapped and facing annihilation in jungle ambushes, Firebase assaults, and in bailouts over hostile territory. The desperate situation in Southeast Asia called for courageous men to rise above their fears and carry out some of the deadliest missions in the history of warfare. They were jobs that had to be done. Forward observers, or FOs, moved ahead of the friendly forces and secured vulnerable vantage points on the front line. From their precarious positions, they served a vital function as the eyes of the artillery gunners delivering rounds to enemy targets. Often alone, the forward observers could easily find themselves surrounded and cut off from their unit and at the mercy of a hostile enemy. As a young man, Barney Barnum knew he was destined to pursue a career in the military. But it wasn't until his training in the Marine Corps that he learned what it meant to be a forward observer. For his heroic action as a forward observer, Barnum would receive the Medal of Honor.
Well, I wanted to be a Marine. My cousin was a Marine in World War II, and I can remember him, in uniform. And my dad was in the poultry production, so he had a deferment, and then when it came time everyone was going, he selected the Marines. And I remember him telling my brother and I years later the reason he selected the Marines is so he'd be the best trained so that he could have a better chance of coming home to his two boys and his wife. But then they passed the age law a week before he went to Parris Island. And my dad, the people went through Parris Island with him, ended up landing on Iwo Jima, so I probably would have grown up without a pop.
Well, and what was it like going through training? Was artillery always the top of your list?
No, I think initially all Marines, you think of being an infantryman. And then there was something about the demonstrations and the firepower and of the artillery when I was going through a basic, and I was impressed with it. And so I started considering that, and because it was with the infantry, travel with the infantry. So I, that's so long ago, I don't know what really drove me to it, but I'm glad I did it.
Did you know at the time what a forward observer was or did?
No, I don't think I knew about anything other than Marine as a Marine until I started training and saw the various divisions: communications, supply, aviation, tanks, artillery, and but the whole thing is, no matter what MOS or military occupational specialty that you were selected or assigned to, you got to lead Marines, and the challenges of leadership are there where you're leading the mess kit repair platoon or a platoon of infantry. They all have the same. I mean, they're individuals. They're youngsters who, you got to set the mission and set the timelines and give them guidance. Step back, let them do it, and give them guidance.
When you first started training to be a forward observer, what was that like?
Well, I graduated from artillery school and went to, from basic school, went to artillery school there at Quantico, Virginia. And part of the syllabus of being an artilleryman was, of course, a forward observer training. And in artillery, in the officer chain, one of the first jobs you get is a forward observer. You're a second lieutenant, and so you're formed up in an artillery battery, and there are four forward observers supporting the four infantry companies in a battalion, and that's usually where a second lieutenant starts out. And it's the toughest job in the artillery because you're out with the infantry, you're humping with them, and after you've done that for a while, then you usually make first lieutenant, graduate up into executive officer or fire direction officer or up on the battalion staff. So most people in the Marine Corps and in the Army and the artillery start out as a forward observer. That's where you get your feet wet. The job of the forward observer with the infantry is the artillery expert or fire support expert with the infantry. So you travel with the infantry company or battalion, and you're there to advise the commander, whether it be a company commander or a battalion commander, in regards to use of supporting arms. Prior to an operation, you tell them what's available and how you can get it, and sometimes you pre-plan a preparation before you go into an area. But a lot of infantry commanders are so intense on their mission that you really got to be a salesman. You know, I can do this for you. I can do this for you. It's not all hi diddle diddle, 2 up and 1 back, and and you got to remind the infantry commander at times that he has this artillery, and don't wait till he's in a hum sandwich and then say, "Hey, Artie, help me." It's got to be part of the planning process. So I think it's a big sales job with the infantry, and of course you're traveling with them, and I found when I was out with the infantry, a lot of times the commander would always say, "Hey, Artie, where are we?" Double checking his knowledge of map reading, because that's one thing with artillery. You do get intensive study in map reading, so that first of all you know where you are, and then you pick out your targets in relation to where you are. So that of course if you call in a certain coordinates, and those coordinates go to the fire direction center, and they plot them on the map, that's where the rounds are going. So if you give them the wrong coordinates, the rounds are going to go to the coordinates that you send in. And so it's very important to know map reading. And after you've been out with the infantry, you gain this respect from the commander that, first of all, you're good at what you do. And, an infantryman's got to be bailed out once. And he's a believer.
Barnum soon found himself in the midst of the first deadly contact with the North Vietnamese Army.
I had been in Vietnam 2 weeks. I had been with this hotel company, 1 week, and was out on my first patrol. Got called back in to load up on a helicopter to go into Operation Harvest Moon. And 4 days into that operation, when we were ending it up, matter of fact, I hadn't called in any fire missions because we hadn't had any contact. But when my company, the battalion, was ambushed, it was the first time I'd ever been shot at. Number one. Been in Vietnam 2 weeks. And first time I was ever shot at. And that was the first fire missions in combat that I had called in. And the first thing I did after I got up off the deck and sought some cover was to call the artillery and adjusted fire. I think that, first of all, it was quite a rude awakening to be thrust into and this was a major ambush. But the first thing I did, when I looked up from underneath my helmet and I'm on the deck, I could see all these young Marines looking at me saying, "Okay, Lieutenant, what the hell are we going to do now?" And the first thing I did with my radio operator and scout sergeant was contact the artillery, and we went into motion, bringing artillery in, and we were at the end of the gun target line. Guns have a certain range, and they were firing into us, so we were really at the end of that range, and so I couldn't bring the rounds right where I wanted them on a couple of the positions because they were a little erratic, especially at the max range. The round stability is not. So I backed off my artillery and only fired them from where I was and the battery. I didn't shoot anything over my head because we took some shrapnel on my position on the first couple rounds that came in. And the battery said we were at the end of the gun target line, max range.
So you called for fire between the artillery and your position?
Yeah, because the enemy the company I was with was the rear element. I had enemy on 3 sides of me. So I fired on 2 sides of me. I didn't fire on the right side. But I was given some helicopter gunships that I utilized to fire on the right side. And the platoon, it was the enemy to my right, is where I launched a counterattack, while at the same time firing artillery back here.
So you had to just sort of, in the middle of mayhem, focus.
Yeah, and at the same time, the company commander was mortally wounded, and he died in my arms, and I took over the infantry company. And so I'm now an infantry company commander and the artillery forward observer, so I have my hands full.
How many men were you left with?
You know, that's 35 years ago, less than 100. About 120, I think we had at that time in the company.
And you were surrounded by...
Well, yes, we were the rear-end security of a battalion movement out of the mountains. And when the ambush was triggered, the North Vietnamese, this was the first time that in the Vietnam War, and this is 65, that a unit, a regiment, with shoulder patches and uniform and the whole bit, we had come in contact with. And when the ambush was triggered, they were smart. They picked out that company commander of mine, you know, with a map in his hand and a radio operator behind him with that big whip antenna. And the first round that triggered the ambush hit him, killed the radio operator and mortally wounded him. And maybe half hour into the battle, after I went out and brought him back and he died in my arms, I took over the company. So at that point, not only was calling in the artillery, but it was running the infantry aspects of the company. And then I was given, as I said, helicopter gunships, because fixed wing was up there, but it was overcast and they couldn't come down. But those, and again, I got to be a forward air controller by directing the helicopter gunships. So, but you know, it all goes back to every Marine is a rifleman first. Every Marine officer is a lieutenant of Marines, infantry, platoon commander, trained at basic school. So all that training came in, and teamwork. And I was as I said to everybody, I went from being a lineman that day to being a quarterback. I called the plays and they executed, and we won the Super Bowl.
You got out alive.
Yeah, we got out. They figured my company overcame 10-1 odds. And we did it as a team. There were no superstars that day. We did it as a team. And I'll tell you, I had to, they did anything I asked them to do, when I asked them. And if someone got shot doing it, then someone else was ready there to do it. And it just shows that teamwork overcomes, and I tell you, you get Marines, when they see their buddies shot up, and they're fired up. You know, when you're in combat, and you're directing, you're leading, you're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about doing your job. And all these young Marines are looking at you, and they're ready to do something, but they're scared. And you got to put them in the right direction, get them moving. And then you don't need a bullwhip on them. You just need some Marines to guide them. And be out there in front of them. You know, it's not go do this, it's follow me. And with that type of leadership is very important. I don't think, people ask, you know, were you scared? When I first got the ambush triggered, I mean, I hit the ground. I was scared. First time I've ever been shot at. And you realize real quick that this is for real. And even though all the training I've been in and all the weapons I'd fired and the artillery I'd fired, to be shot at is amazing. And then to look around and see people who are bleeding, dying, dead, it makes you realize that all that training, and I think it's like getting on a bicycle. You know, after the years, you get on, you ride. You get in a car, you drive. I'd had the training, and I started doing what. And in a situation like that, support of the young Marine and the great corpsman I had with me, leading by example, standing up and doing things, and using common sense. And if something didn't work, tried something else. You know, we didn't stop. We never stopped. And I had to make some tough decisions. And when I ran one counterattack to our right flank with a platoon, I had some people shot up. But I knew if I didn't do that, then they were going to get us. And then later on into the battle, later on in the afternoon, we're running low on ammunition. We're cut off 500 meters from the rest of the unit. And the battalion commander says, "You've got to come out." we can't come get you. If you don't come out, you're going to be there by yourself tonight. I knew if we were there by ourselves tonight, it was all over. So I made some decisions. First thing I did is had the engineers blow some trees down so I could bring in helicopters to take out the dead and the wounded. And then I had everyone drop their packs in a pile. We blew them up. And every piece of unusable equipment, we blew it up to make ourselves light for the breakout. And then I remember from basic training, fire and maneuver, So I started fire and maneuvering across 500 meters, and I knew that it was going to take forever and we'd never make it. So I got everyone together and said, okay, we're going to go in squad rushes. And we'll set up a base of fire, and one squad goes, and they get across, the next one, hi diddle-diddle. And if someone gets shot, you pick them up. We're not leaving anybody on the battlefield. That's what happened. Someone got shot, 2 guys picked them up. And we just did. I never ran so fast in my life. But I was the last one out. And then when I got out, the first thing the battalion commander said to me when I got over there is, do you have everybody? And I said, I'll know very shortly. We made a count, and I did. I had everybody. And the dead and the wounded that didn't get out on the helicopter, we brought with us. And needless to say, there was a couple supply officers when it was all over were a little upset that I blew up some of their equipment. But we blew it up so that the bad guys couldn't capture it and use it. And the same with our personal packs. A lot of guys afterwards were complaining, they had pictures of their wives or their wallet and stuff. And then someone says, hey, but we're alive.
Ultimately, Barnum credits his training as a forward observer for giving him the know-how to escape.
As a forward observer, you learn to control, especially in the Marine Corps, naval gunfire and air. And I'd had that training in the Philippines, down at the Bonus Islands. I'd fired naval gunfire and fired air. But adjusting any fire support, whether it be a tank or a recoilless rifle or whatever, if you can identify a target, communicate with the shooter, give them the urgency and tell them you're ready to control it, then it doesn't make any difference whether it's an aircraft, a bazooka, a recoilless rifle, or artillery, and that's key. Now I had the gunships on the radio net. They were on the command net, which was superb. And I stood up and at times said, fly down my arms. I put my arms pointing at the target where they were coming in from, and they flew down my arms and shot the target. And I did that after I ran out. We had a 3.5 rocket launcher with Willie Peter, and I would mark the target. And I did that myself. I stood up there on the top of the hill and fired at the machine gun nest or at the line, and I think mainly because I didn't want to send some kid up there to do it. And I had the radio on my back, so I'm talking to the helicopters, and so I would mark around and then talk them in on it. When I ran out of the Willie Peter round or I had a misfire, I'd stand up there with my arms stretched and said, fly down my arms. And they'd line up on my arms, and they'd say, I see him, get out of the way. And then they'd come. So it was fire support. And a forward observer is really the fire support advisor, controller, executor for the infantry guy. So as I said, it doesn't matter what type it is. But that commander wants fire support. Well, I just happen to be the infantry commander and the fire support guy. There's a lot to be done. You get involved in doing it. And in the fog of war, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of noise, and you sort of block it out, and you do what's got to be done. As I said, survival is a strong motivator. And when you get these young Marines looking at you, and once I tried a couple things and they were successful, these kids do anything for me. And it was funny, the next day after it was all over, we're walking down out of the mountains, and there's 4 young Marines around me. One in front, one in back, to the left and right. And I says to the gunny, Gunny, what are these young Marines doing? They said, you saved our life yesterday. I didn't want anything to happen to you today. So they knew that, they knew what we were in, and we came out of it. And we came out of it together. But if you win, we don't need heroes. We just need teamwork and mission accomplishment. And of course, in combat, the best prepared win, second best prepared lose. There ain't no second place on the battlefield. So the best trained. So the other thing is we got to do the best thing to support the infantry so they can take the objective with least casualties in the fastest amount of time. And that's what the artillery is all about. There's no sense going up with a bayonet on the end of a rifle if you can sit back and hit them with artillery and then go up and police up the battlefield. And the other thing is with all the sophisticated technology and weapon systems that we have today, the linchpin to our success is that Marine or that soldier with a rifle and a bayonet that goes up and polices up the battlefield. And everything's in support of him. People forget about that. They talk about how glamorous airplanes are and ships out at sea and all of this. But if it wasn't for the infantrymen, we wouldn't have a military. And I remind young lieutenants that if it wasn't for privates and corporals, we wouldn't need lieutenants and captains. People die when you're up against the enemy. Some units seem to be in more combat than others. And, in Vietnam in '65 I was there. We were fighting the guerrillas and stuff. Now, I hit a unit in December, a large regiment, but that was out of the ordinary to be that far south. I went back 68 and 69 up north along the DMZ. They were all, the Viet Cong type thing was gone, and they were North Vietnamese regulars. Well-trained, well-led, well-equipped. So all depends on what type of battle you're in. But yes, we, Forward Observer, I guess they all look forward to when they make first lieutenant or they've been in the bush 6 months and they come back into the battery area. Because it's tough. I mean, you're out, you're in the line of fire, as is the infantry. And I can remember one of my Forward Observers, John Tootin, is down in Brunswick, Georgia now, as a very successful architect. Forward Observer, out there with the infantry one night, and they were surrounded. We were firing illumination, and he kept saying, "Skipper, when the lights go out, they come in on us." Well, we got put in a check fire that night because helicopters in the area. So I didn't fire, and they were coming in on him. So I had someone up going like this, saying, "I don't hear any helicopters, I don't either," and we kept firing. Now, I, put a lot on the line, but my lieutenant was out there being overrun, and when I stopped firing illumination, then they moved in on him. Not only him, but the infantry. So I fired that night. Thank God I didn't shoot a helicopter out of the sky, I guess. But those are the things you do, I mean, it's a risky business. Anytime you're dealing with ammunition and guns, if you don't do it right, then there are problems. I mean, they're designed to kill and maim. You just got to make sure that you control it so it's the bad guy that gets killed and maimed.
Brian Thacker got his first taste of working with heavy artillery while training in Europe, far from the perils of the combat in Southeast Asia.
I was lucky. I was sent to Europe for troop assignment before I went to Vietnam. And in Europe, there were 2 officers in the firing battery where the normal complement was 6. So I got to do everything except command the battery. I was motor officer, fire direction officer. We all did forward observing training. All of the lieutenants. That was, if push came to shove, that was what we had to be able to do. So in terms of training, I'd seen pretty much all of the firing battery as a young lieutenant, right out of artillery school, right out of college.
What was it like calling rounds, even in practice? Because it seems like there's something significantly powerful about saying, "I want, shells on this target now."
That's part of you've got to come to understand that, what you're playing with can hurt a lot of people if you screw up. And you're given every opportunity to do that. And I have to say, I had my share of mistakes that again were, when you look back, I didn't put one out of safety. I watched one and I had the safety for batteries where I had to stop a fire mission from going down because it was unsafe and I didn't think they put it in the impact zone. but yeah, with the size of the weapon that we were dealing with, we could take out a football field, and it could be ours just as easily as anybody else, or it could be a civilian, and it gives you part of the attraction is that power, but it has to be used right, and that's kind of, again, with the battery that I was in Germany, even though it was training environment. All of the NCOs had been to Vietnam. About a third of the troops had been to Vietnam and were just finishing out their 2-year commitment or 3-year commitment or whatever. And they made sure that they taught you that it was, you're here to learn, we've got you for 6 months. Everything that they could teach, as long as you had an open mind, open ears, open eyes. And that was part of the culture. But it was one of those things that in Germany you had to go far more by the book. And when you'd see somebody cutting a corner and you'd ask about it, and you'd remind them that you're in Europe, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, got to go by the book." And it was, but when you have to, this is a corner that you can cut and probably get away with it. And there were ways to communicate far more succinctly than what the school solution was. But you have to start with the school solution. You have to start somewhere. I think one of the skills that they're looking for, at least was my experience, more so in Germany than in Vietnam, was you don't get lost. There's something about the way your brain is constructed, the way I articulate it now, is that, yeah, I can read a map. I pretty much know where north is. And I have a sense of place. And that's a talent or an attribute that I think the Army has learned to build on. And from there they teach you, you can do this. If you were an infantryman trying to attack, where would you come from? Oh, well, I know how to block that. I know how to make that guy's life difficult. Most, well, there's the constant banter back and forth between the king of battle and the queen of battle. That if you've been around the Army a lot, you start to get. I'm not too sure that they're all that different, and when you strip away all of that stuff. But particularly, again, what you're looking for is somebody who can read terrain and some computational skill, particularly if you've got to supervise the FDC. You've got to be comfortable with your arithmetic, with your math. And yeah, I was in college, so it was sort of a natural fit.
But soon after his initial training, Brian became a part of the military war machine.
There were many times to pause. My battery commander sat me down and said, "I've got good news and bad news for you." It's okay, what's the bad news? Well, what's the good news? Give me the good news first. The good news is that you're going to be safety officer tomorrow. And this is at 5:30. You haven't had supper. You haven't done your homework yet. So it means you were going to get maybe one beer that night before you had to go to bed, because you were going to get up real early the next morning. And it was, okay, if that's the good news, what's the bad news? Here are your orders to Vietnam. It's been good to know you. But I need you to do that safety. We don't have any trucks or any trucks going back to the garrison until day after tomorrow. So you've got one more day of work to do here. and do you want 30 days leave, which was a fairly standard policy on somebody on orders like that. So of course you took your 30-day leave, got your orders, went to see whoever you wanted to see, because it might be the last time you see them. And then when you get to Seattle-Tacoma Airport, you make the decision to get on the bus and go to Fort Lewis instead of going left and going to Vancouver, Canada, in British Columbia. So it was many opportunities there to say, okay, do I really want to do this? And it's, can I live with myself if I don't? Because certainly somebody else is going to have to fill your shoes.
And this was when, 70?
This was 69, 70. When I went to Vietnam was 70. Yeah, because I didn't get out of college till 69.
So that's, I mean, we knew a lot about the war at that point. So
we knew we knew the wheels were off. We knew we were getting out. We already knew that we had a racial problem and issues. That the armed forces was no different than our regular society. There was an incredible anti-war sentiment in the age group that I was with that was very divisive. And a lot of people just couldn't understand, well, why don't we just get out? Why don't we just leave? Pull the troops out now. Why go? That's one of those questions we'll be arguing about for a long time to come. And it's the answer is you just can't leave and pull out that quickly. As was pointed out, I mean, I don't claim any credit for it. When you're young like that, one of the things you want to find out, one of the allures of taking a commission, is can you lead troops in combat? It's a very difficult environment. And do you have what it takes? Can you make it? And that's something that you really don't know. And it's an opportunity to find out. And you accept the risks that go with that.
You found out quickly, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I was told by the troops in Germany that not to sweat it, I'd make it. I didn't say by how much, but it was, don't worry, LT, you'll make it. And that's a question that you have. Anybody who accepts a commission, in the beginning in your training, it looks like you can do it. But until you get in front of the troops and have to do it, you don't know. And I didn't know.
What happened when you got to Vietnam?
I reported for duty. Kind of like Europe, the Divardi commander said, well, what battalion needs a lieutenant the most? And when he found out what my experience was in Germany, it was, well, you're going to the 5.5 unit that he had, so you didn't have to relearn the weapon or the firing tables, so you just take advantage of what you already knew. And it's go down and see the battalion commander. He'll assign you from there to whichever company or whatever location. And again, it was not what you expect to find, not at least the way they drew it up in school. That artillery battalion was running, 3 batteries, but was running 6 or 7 firing locations. They had lots of platoons in batteries that were separated and just running far more than the 3 locations that you would expect. And so there was more than ample opportunity to 2 officers to a platoon. You had it all. One had to we just called one an XO and the other a fire direction officer. That there can only be 1 battery commander, but I never saw my battery commander after he assigned me to the platoon that I was with. There were 2 lieutenants with a platoon supporting combat engineers, and for 4 months that's what we did.
Although Thacker was trained to work with artillery, he urged his commander to put him on the front lines.
With the busy fall season just around the corner, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Too busy with your end-of-summer goals to cook but want to make sure you're eating well? With Factor, skip the extra trip to the grocery store and the chopping, prepping, and cleaning up too, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy, then get back to crushing your goals. Level up with Gourmet Plus options prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccolini, leeks, truffle butter, and asparagus. With Factor, you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. We offset 100% of our delivery emissions, source 100% renewable electricity for our production sites and offices, and feature sustainably sourced seafood in our meals. This August, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door, ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/warriors50 and use code warriors50 to get 50% off. That's code warriors50 at factormeals.com/warriors50 to get 50% off.
I had asked for an assignment in the headquarters. Just said, hey, I spent all of my time in a firing battery, but never any time in a battalion setting, in a headquarters setting, where the coordination goes on. If you need somebody to fill in for a few weeks, whatever, I'd like an opportunity. And, that's, you make your druthers known and, the dream comes true. And while there, we got this 3 or 4 suitcases, pieces of equipment that were an observation system, and the XO called me in and said, Lieutenant, you are going to have a team, and it's going to be called the Integrated Observation Team, and you're going to get the following people. Because again, with the battalion scattered all over a couple of provinces, I didn't know people. I didn't know what I really needed. The school, the Fort Sill had said, this is what you're probably going to need. So yeah, I inherited a bunch of soldiers and we had to learn how to make that piece of equipment work. Try to, what could you do with it, what couldn't you do with it. We had a week there at the headquarters location to check it out and unpack it and put it together, and after a week here's a truck, go down to another location, set up, observe, and then it was put it in the truck, come back to the headquarters. You've got to go meet the battalion commander of a sister artillery battalion that needs help. And you're going to be detached from our battalion and attached to this other long-range artillery battalion so that you can observe for 175s instead of 155s.
What was the piece of equipment that you unpacked?
It was 3 pieces. It was a theodolite with a laser for a ranging device, which theoretically you could go out to 30 kilometers. The farthest we could ever get out was about 24, 25, and be accurate within the 3 or 4 meters of what you were ranging. We had a night observation scope that let us, a big starlight scope, one of the 16-inch varieties, that allowed you to look at everything at night with just starlight power. And then they had a set of Navy binoculars that they used from cruisers. I forget where they got them. They were 60-pound binoculars. But you could see a long way over 6 degrees, and they were designed to be for adjusting fire from the Navy. And the Navy didn't need them anymore, so they patched these things on, and you had a huge platform, 800 pounds worth of equipment on a tripod. And once surveyed in, because you were shooting straight line, you could tell a computer where you wanted that round to be within just a few meters. So once you saw a target, your ability to locate it in 3 dimensions, you should be able to put the round very close on first round. If everything else worked right, you know, 1 round and maybe 1 adjustment, and you should be there, ready to fire for effect. And with 175s, I could be, we were 15 kilometers away from the firing, from the tubes, and we could see clearly out to the edge of their rangefinder, and you don't have to be that accurate with 175s. Just get them in the grid square, and they mess things up. But we were one observation team up on the mountain, and there was another piece of equipment down at Ben Head, which was right on the border, that was doing the same thing, and we could observe fairly accurately a huge area up on the border.
Which border?
Cambodia and Laos. We were not the forwardmost location. There was one other American unit right on the border at the Special Forces camp. But we were pretty close.
Close enough.
Well, closer than we ever wanted to be, but again, you're sitting up on a mountaintop. If you've ever been in the mountains or around mountains, my dad was from West Virginia, so when we went home, I knew what it was like to be in the valleys, on the hilltops. So being above the clouds was no problem to me. Understood what was going on, kind of, and again, the sense of topography and terrain. It was, okay, I think I know what's going on here. Now, where could I go without me seeing them from here? Because there's this ridge line in front of me, kind of stuff.
So you were detached, and you had this big new fancy piece of equipment.
Yeah, that was being prototyped. It was being field tested. As far as we knew, we were amongst the first units in combat to actually get it. That probably wasn't true, but they wanted to find out, how does it work in a particular environment? How can you make it work? How can you improve the accuracy of your fire? And again, the challenge in artillery is target acquisition. Until you see it and can know where it is, your tubes are kind of useless.
And so this was a new method of target acquisition because of the laser accuracy?
The laser accuracy in particular, yeah. I mean, they had computers. They were beginning to use computers to do the computation. And there was a function on there for straight line distance. So when somebody had set up the system, they knew that the laser capability was coming along. And that it was, particularly, they were thinking of this type of situation where you've got long-range artillery, you've got a very deep battlefield. How do you observe, how do you accurately identify targets out there? And of course, bring fire to bear.
On that first mission, Thacker's unit came face to face with the enemy.
What I knew then and what I know now, of course, are two different things. We were assaulted, what, as I learned out later to be, were by 2 sapper battalions, supported by pretty much a full North Vietnamese infantry division. They used the same organizational names that we do. They weren't quite as big in terms of manpower, but function is mostly the same. They had the artillery battalion that they had forward supporting their sapper battalions was rocket-propelled grenades, but it was a full battalion of them. It wasn't just a battery supporting them. And again, in retrospect, when you're on top of a mountain, it's almost an impregnable position. There's only two ways to assault that position, and that's on either ridgeline, on either end. And it's a very narrow front, so it's rather easily defended. So when you go after a position like that, you have to go after it with a lot. The attack on that fire base was part of an offensive that the North Vietnamese attacked along a 100-kilometer front that morning. So every position that I had been at received incoming fire. And a lot of those that I hadn't were attacked as well, all within a few minutes of each other. So in the beginning, commanders just have to sort it out. Where are we just being probed? Where are we really vulnerable? Where am I most vulnerable? And it turns out that the fire base that I was on was probably the main objective. Everything else was diversionary, but spread all the resources out. And clearly the North Vietnamese, in my mind, wanted the 4 pieces of ARVN artillery that were up there. And they wanted to take that fire base quickly so that they would be able to use whatever ammunition the ARVN had up there against 3 other fire bases and several villages, because that's what that position did. It could fire support for many locations. You look back and you say, yeah, well, if it was that important, why wasn't it a little bit more heavily defended? That's hindsight.
But so you were out with as a forward observer, or with a forward observing team, with this new piece of equipment on top of the hill, watching this attack as it happened?
Oh, if I could have seen the attack, I would have done something about it. I mean, they came out of the shadows at 6:30 in the morning when we were in sunlight and they were in the dark. They came out of rainforest. They came out beneath where I was looking at dead space. And it wasn't that it's exactly where I would have come from if I had to attack. That again, it was, once you got in close to that piece of equipment, you didn't need it to observe. You could do that with traditional methods. And it was the same way with the Vietnamese had 4 105 howitzers at that location. Once you got within a kilometer of them or got close to them and underneath them, you couldn't shoot. You couldn't get around on them. They were too close. And that's what the North Vietnamese recognized tactically and were able to get large numbers of people in real close to attack that fire base.
So you were at the fire base?
I was at an ARVN fire base. Yeah, it wasn't an American fire base. It was...
Say what ARVN is.
Oh, that was the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. It was the South Vietnamese Army.
And so what happened as you were overrun?
They tried to. We were never really overrun. Their initial attack was able to penetrate the perimeter and force all of the defenders back into a tighter and tighter. We shared the fire bases. Again, you're talking about something that's not much bigger than the end zone of a football field. And again, it was, they had the manpower to keep pushing, and we didn't have enough reserves to take a counterattack and take back. And they had the ability to resupply. We didn't. The aviation company tried to resupply us once and lost 1 helicopter, was shot down. They had an anti-aircraft position well established. I could never find the SOB. Knew generally where he was and what they were doing, but could never get close enough to him to really suppress. They shot down a 2nd helicopter that was trying to extract the first crew. So we suddenly had 7 extra Americans inside the wire that again, had they been a regular infantry squad with a machine gun and a few other things, you could have thought about spending the night. We'd rather had a platoon than a squad, but to think about that. But again, spending the night was not thinkable. We knew that up there, even though I didn't know what we were up against. It was, we knew it was an incredibly serious, from our perspective, not just a probe, an attack. So we, gave the ARVN commander enough time to burn his powder and render his guns useless, and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it was time to leave the Firebase. And at that point, it was, I need blocking fire. I called for artillery fire on the position, with nothing more than the intent of giving us time to withdraw and separate from the main attacking force. You get 5-10 minutes distance between you, then you have enough time to get an extraction zone set up and get farther up the ridge and get out.
So you actually called for fire on your own position?
Sure.
On top of us?
On top of it. Well, at that point, most everyone was getting ready to leave. There was no real threat to the main force that was left, because by the time they got ready to shoot, they would have had a couple of minutes to get out and get up the ridge line. So it was, on my command if you can, or when they changed to variable time fuse and said we'll be there in 30 seconds, and then that was all I needed to say, yeah, well, we're out of here. The Firebase has been evacuated. I was basically the last American off.
So you were in command of you sort of assumed command of the Firebase?
Oh, no.
Wasn't that simple?
Oh, I'm a lieutenant with less than 2 years experience, looking at a captain, Vietnamese captain with 10-15 years experience, school trained in America, English, command of the English language equivalent to mine or better, who was fighting for his life and his way of life. I wasn't going to command him at all, and wasn't able to tell him much at all as an advisor. I mean, again, that's a misconception or a misnomer. I had some target acquisition capability that he didn't, and I could call for the artillery fire in English, and they knew my voice was an American voice, not somebody who could speak good English. So it was his Firebase. There was never any question of that. And when he was done with his job, it was, we can go now. It's okay. Put his advisor in the middle with the helicopter crews and get somebody out on the point that knew where they were going. It could read a map, and I took the rear. And we left the Firebase as a reasonably coherent unit.
And as you were calling in fire, or you had already called for fire?
I had called for the fire. Had they given me HE, it would have been there 30 seconds sooner.
What's HE?
High explosive, just an impact round. What they did was they changed to a fuse, that radar kind of fuse that sensed the ground and gave you an airburst. For what I wanted, far more effective. I didn't call for a VT fuse. I just said shoot the position. By that time, the battalion commander was at the Firebase and said had him give the variable time. It was, and they didn't think twice about shooting the mission. They were prepared to shoot it, and they did it as quickly as they could.
Was it effective?
As far as I'm concerned, it was. I have a copy of the fire mission. They shot 38 rounds over 45 minutes, 50 minutes. And they could fire one round. only 13, 14, I forget how many kilometers away it was. It was not a long shot for a 175. And they could keep people from moving up and down that ridge for the hour.
And what happened next?
Well, I didn't stay up with the group. But, staying behind to get that final command in, I got separated. And chose not to stay on the ridge line following them, trying to catch up. That a 2-minute head start was, I felt much too vulnerable running by myself. So I got off the ridge line and started just following the mountain. And then quickly realized that was also being stupid, that I was not, no one was shooting at me. I was in a no man's land. There was no one there. I had just as much chance of making it as stopping and waiting for night and waiting to see what would happen and develop as trying to catch up with and maybe miss the extraction completely, because once separated, they were running as fast as they could. I wasn't going to run much faster, and I had no idea where they were going to stop and stuff like that, so hadn't thought about that. And quickly decided to ditch my radio, that it was extra weight and something that I didn't, at that point it was, all the radio was doing is drawing attention to myself. And it became a liability, so again, in retrospect, I probably didn't have to do that.
How heavy was the radio?
Oh, it was one of the regular backpack radios, 25 pounds. And I didn't have a pack to carry it. I just had a radio that I had scrounged up from somebody said, here's a radio, you need it, because the initial attack took mine away. So, again, we were pretty much operating on the fly. At least I was. Everyone was.
25 pounds is still a lot to be humping around when you're trying to stay alive.
Well, that's one of those things that I've thought about. Is heck, I had the channel. All I had to do was stay on the ridge line probably, and I would have caught up with them. That it was, 30, 45 minutes later before an extraction was actually executed. And the cooler heads up front obviously got to a location where they could establish a perimeter and helicopters could get in and they could be extracted. There were 7 Americans there that were from the aviation company. There was a lot of motivation to pick them up.
So, whether that would have worked or not, the reality is they were extracted.
They were extracted and I wasn't.
What happened then?
I waited. And I found a bamboo thicket that was thick enough for me to crawl into, and fortunately nobody else looked in it. And my thought process at that point was they're not going to leave 4 artillery tubes on the top of a mountain very long. You can't. It just doesn't make any tactical sense. And I was right, the next day or 24 hours after we left the Firebase, just before sunset the next day, the South Vietnamese air assaulted back onto the Firebase with a battalion of Rangers. Came with a lot of infantry and a lot of firepower. And were able to retake the Firebase fairly easily, according to the MACV people that went in with them. But they were surrounded, and it was a stalemate sort of. It was, well, you can have the top of the mountain, but you can't get out. We have anti-aircraft capability, so you can't bring a helicopter in to lift the guns out because we'll shoot it down. And it's, okay, guys, what are you going to do? And I'm sitting out there less than a kilometer away from the Firebase, listening to all of it. You didn't stick your head up. But also knew that didn't dare move because there were only enemy forces were around it. So it was stay in the bamboo thicket as long as you could until things wore out or settled down, and make up your mind when to move later.
Were you injured? How did you survive?
I was not injured. I was in a place that was actually very secure. I mean, we were strafed with gunships. And it turns out I was right underneath an approach route into the Firebase. The North Vietnamese had an anti-aircraft group right around me. And we knew, obviously our side knew that there was an anti-aircraft unit there because they got hammered every time a supply ship came in or something was going on. And any kind of helicopter got close, you could hear them come. You could hear the gunships come first and just do some suppressing fire. And it's very difficult to penetrate bamboo. It's pretty tough grass.
What did you have for food and water?
There wasn't any. That again, that was when the attack came in the morning, we were forced out of our bunker that we were staying in fairly quickly. So what you left the bunker with was what you had. A hat, a nightshirt, a pair of boots for me. Because, that's how I woke up. And my initial response was to go outside and take a look around and see what was going on. I didn't stop to get properly dressed and put all my gear on. Never got a chance to go back in and get it.
And how many days were you there?
I was out 8 days, 7 or 8 days. You lose track.
And what happened? How did you get found, or did you find them?
Well, I was at a point to where I can live and survive another week or two here. But I was getting weaker, and I could tell that. And it was, okay, you've got to take the chance of, by that time I knew when the lulls were, when the observers got up, when was it safe to move. And there were windows of opportunity when it was safe to move, right at dawn. Particularly when it was kind of gray and the clouds were still there. The North Vietnamese were still having breakfast. Our observers were having breakfast because of the clouds. It didn't do any good to be on station to fly. Nothing. They could mortar the location to keep everybody, wake them up, but it was really, right at dusk was very similar, that you could move then. And so one morning I decided it's time to try to make it back to what would be friendly lines. So I climbed back up the mountainside. Took the better part of the morning. And I realized just how close and how weak I was, because I couldn't go very long without losing my breath. But again, there was a no man's land in between the location where I was and the Firebase. At least I think there was a no man's land there, because I was able to go through it pretty quick and then squeak my way into the Firebase. The vocal cords were pretty dry. I had a team of 6. I lost 3. One of them still missing. And then there was a MACV advisor on the location as well. And one of those people are still missing. One of the helicopter crews, the first one in, lost a pilot when it was shot down. From our side on that day, it's 5? Who knows how many North Vietnamese. They took their lumps too.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation of In Their Own Words. This program was created and produced by First Person Productions in association with the Documentary Broadcasting Company. The stories told herein were supplied by the Honor Project. Produced by David Benson. Content written and produced by Dave Barsky. Engineered by Greg Bartheld and Brian Donovan. Narrated by Bill Ratner. This production is copywritten by First Person Productions Incorporated. Any unauthorized broadcast, public performance, or copying is a violation of applicable laws.
History is complicated. The story of human progress is long, messy, and riddled with controversies big and small. On Conflicted, we dive headfirst into history's most infamous events and contentious figures. We try and untangle the good from the bad, the fact from the fiction, and the monsters from the misunderstood. Was Genghis Khan a murderous butcher or a civic pioneer? Did the Allied powers go too far in firebombing the German city of Dresden at the twilight of World War II? And how did the Marquis de Sade acquire such a sinister reputation? And was any of it true? These are just a few of the tough questions we wrestle with and investigate on Conflicted. So if you love history or just enjoy a good story, please join me, your host, Zach Cornwell, for a fascinating new topic each and every month. Conflicted, a history podcast, is available on Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you get your podcasts. I hope to see you soon.